Welcome to Insight Driven Decisions, how leaders turn insight into strategic impact. Our goal is helping you move from insight to impact to action, and doing all this through decision grade insights.
Hello, friends. I'm John Burshak. I'm joined today by John Willie. We'll introduce ourselves more in a bit, but let's get right into why we're doing this. The big question for today is why insight doesn't turn into impact. All right, John, I'm going to read you, and I've made a list here because it seems nonstop coming across my desk here. I'm going to read you what some of these forecasts for 2026 are all saying. And it doesn't matter whether they're coming from our industry or the AI industry or anyone. There all seems to be this common thread. And it goes something like this. Here's our forecast for 2026. Just insert a name. This is it. Budgets are tightening. The scrutiny is rising. Anything that can't prove its value gets questioned. Everything is now leading to the industry's biggest question, which is, how do we prove insight's value at the executive level? So with that, I'm going to lay it out there that I think the most existential threat facing our insights industry, as that just shared to us, is the issue is not whether it's AI, it's not whether it's market research or customer insight or customer experience done better slightly than what we've got. We think the issue from my perspective on the outside is it's that companies have a decision problem. What do you think? What do you say to that?
I would agree. And I think that we both have experience with that. We've both seen that in a number of different cases. I think another underlying theme from what you just read out of those idea about the forecast for 2026 is the ability to connect the value of insights with the actual business decisions that are made. And that's quantifying the value that these insights bring to business decisions, because that's not always readily apparent. It's not always easy to see, but that's something that I think we can hopefully move the needle and allow business executives to understand why insights are such an important foundation for making good decisions moving forward.
Well, and when you think about it from the decision maker's perspective, these are business leaders who have heard, we've been singing our praises and trying to influence people that we, as an insights company, industry, whatever, can make or break a company. And that's really, I'm not sure that's even the right question, because executives have heard that the next investment is going to transform the business. It was research. It was analytics. Now it's AI. They're spending billions to make a few extra million. And so they've been through it all before. Okay. And so when we're looking at it, we go, well, okay, so there has to be something that's changed, right? We're doing all this and we're trying to prove our worth to the world out there. And yet when you look at overall, and this I think is very, very telling, but I was researching even before we started today, overall business success metrics, it doesn't matter how you want to measure them, they have not risen proportionally at all when you look at the rise that has been spent on research, customer insight, customer experience, user experience, AI now adding to that, data and analytics. There's no impact that is being felt by the business decision makers. And that's why I think that's, how do we prove insights value at the executive level is the main question that is out there for everybody, is just because it honestly is still on the table after all these years. I think also there's that fact you mentioned. I want you to expand on this. So I think the problem is, you look at analytics and customer insight, user experience, even Gen AI, every way that you can measure the impact that we bring into the equation, we're all upstream from the decision. I think you said it best when we were talking about this. You said, you know what? There's not a researcher that you know of, and I'm on the outside, I don't know of one either, that is actually making the decision that needs to be made for the company based off the insight. I want to expand on that just a bit.
Well, a while ago, there was like a buzz that was going around, a buzzword, actionable research. Have you provided any actionable research? In fact, even in interviews or things, people go, give me an idea, give me an example of some actionable research that you've produced. And I've always thought every piece of research I've ever done, in my opinion, has been actionable. That's the way that I feel about it. But it's not up to me to take that action. I can only deliver the information. I can deliver the insight. I can provide my angle, my opinion, my perception of it, but I'm not the one that makes the decision. That's a separate thing. On my side of the fence, which is the client side, most of the time, the people who provide research and insights, it's a client-based organization, even within the organization, right? It's the various business units within a large corporation that are calling upon us, and we're serving them. But once we do that, it's up to them to make the decision. And so there is a bit of a separation there. And trying to prove value for the work that we do is difficult because, number one, the decision is not in our hands. And number two, the person making the decision can opt to go in a completely different direction than what we believe or what you might believe the research is telling them to do. I mean, that's just the way it is. But yeah, there is a gap between the work that we do and then we hand it off, and it's up to somebody else to make the choice as to whether or not to move forward with it. And so it's out of our hand. We're not the decision makers. We're the information providers. But rarely have I've never been in a situation where the person who actually does the work gets to make the call.
That is really, really rare. And I'm thinking back even on the leaders that you and I have had the opportunity to work with and meet with. And it's really interesting. There's a pressure to prove our worth. And yet at the same time, the question to actually answer is of our worth is very hard. Not because the efforts don't matter. I love the story you told about the whole, you have this block inside of a company and there's a huge amount of expenditure. So it looks all red in the accounting spreadsheet, and yet it's driving a lot of black in all of these other things. And that connection is just not happening. It's not that the leaders are ignoring those insights at all. They're actually implementing them, but it's like they haven't made the connection. You want to expound on that?
Well, most of my work in my career has been in the content business, right? In the media side of things. And we do research and provide insights at all various stages of content creation and production and distribution. And primarily the revenue is driven through ads and then for like post sales or distribution, essentially. The work that we might provide in terms of just the program development could be very useful and very valuable, and it might actually make the program get to air and have a long life. We might actually do maintenance work too that allows the series to extend another few years, which gives it added value downstream when they go to distribute it, because you got 150 episodes instead of 100 episodes. So you take those 50, blah, blah, blah. But how can I necessarily prove that the work that we did to get this series renewed for another 2 or 3 years, by the time that revenue is actually fully realized, it's way downstream and the money's already been spent. From the guys who just do nothing but count beans, right? And the guys that are sometimes paid to come in and run around for a while and sit and what do they call it? Evaluate the business and try and offer ideas for better margins or what have you. They look at a research and insights department and just go like, it's a big black hole, because all they do is spend money. All they're doing is they're buying data, they're running groups, they're doing all kinds of stuff that's costing us money, but they're not bringing in any money, because directly speaking, we're not a revenue generator. We're a revenue generator supporter is what we are. But when the guys that, like I said, like the CFOs and the accountants and stuff look at it, generally speaking, that department within a large corporation is just a big bundle of expenditure without any revenue to balance it. And all of the revenue is being generated on these other departments. And so they look at it and go like, let's cut, let's get rid of this. Like I said, I'm spent most of my time in the media side of things. I actually had a CFO in a meeting one time saying, do we really need Nielsen? And right. And when you're in, it was at a cable network. And he goes like, "Do we need it? Do we need Nielsen?" And I looked at him and I said, "If you want to continue to make money by selling ads, yes, you do." But I understand it, because on a spreadsheet, that's a big number, right? And
Yeah.
if you're the accountant or the CFO, the bean counter, that's all you're doing is you're hunting for big numbers on the spreadsheet. How can I whack it as quickly as possible? There's a big number, and it's my big number, and I don't have anything to balance it against, because the number that would balance it is in somebody else's P&L. And so, I mean, that kind of gets to the gist of what you were saying is the question at the beginning of this. It takes a little bit of a leap of logic for the money guys to understand that. And it's also a bit more artful way for us to indicate our value by making that apparent to them. And it's not always easily done. But yeah, I mean, look, in my experience, when you're in this type of work within a large corporation, you're just viewed as like a money pit. It's
Well,
frustrating.
yes, yes, that would be very frustrating. And I'm sure you've heard what you're really coming down to is there's decisions to be made all the time. You just described several that are being made outside of your insights group. And yet at the same time, maybe the insights were designed to answer those questions. I know you and I have definitely done some work that designed the insights to answer business questions. We'll get to a great example here in just a little bit, but there is one of those questions out there in the industry are the insights, how the questions are being asked, who they're being asked of, are those things that are being found out really delivering to anybody who has a business decision that they're accountable for? I'm going to bring that back to one of the stories that you have here. But the one thing that I wanted to say, I'm sure you've heard is, and honestly, in preparing for this today, I had three things this last week alone cross my desk that said, you know what? Our industry, we just have to tell the story better. It's magical. It's mysterious. We've got to like bring this into some kind of a world that I don't even know what it is, but it's better storytelling. And oh, by the way, hire us. We'll be able to do this for you.
Yeah.
Because obviously, if you're dealing with data, you just can't have a clue how to do this. So that's definitely, I want to kind of use today to kind of kill that myth. And yeah, before we get into that, I thought, we've made it this far. We really should talk about who this show is for. Do you want to get into that, or do you want me to just jump into that? And who are our listeners that we're developing this thing for?
Go ahead. This was your idea, so you go ahead and spell it out, and I'll jump in when
All right.
necessary.
Okay. So here we go. First of all, we're not going to be a research show. I think anybody who's listened to research shows on YouTube or podcasts,
I hope not.
I hope not. I hope we can do better. I really, really do. And I'm not putting
If people aren't asleep already.
Yeah, I hope so. But so if you're looking to, learn about running better analytics, learn about better dashboards, learn about, doing better storytelling, we're not here for that for you. What we're here for are leaders who are smart, experienced, successful, and yet they still feel like something in their customer understanding isn't translating into action. So we're doing this for the smart leaders that we both worked with, and we think there are a lot of others out there. And the leaders that we're looking for here are the ones that they know something's off. Maybe they can't even name it. So, if you think about who that would be, that's like a marketing exec looking at dashboards every morning when they come in on the Monday, and yet at the same time, they're starved for that decision impact. It's a data-rich, action-starved executive. The executive, the CMO, even an agency leader, because I don't know, I mean, on the outside, we work with agencies a lot and help them actually do better with all of their campaigns. But they just know that there's something missing from the customer, and they can't prove it. They can't prove why it matters. Maybe it's an agency leader. This is like the old days where they're stuck selling unsupported tactics. Well, you know what? We got this great idea. We passed it around the shop. Everybody in the shop loves it. So it's got to work, right? I mean, I've been around the field enough to know that is, and it has not gone away. That's still one of the ways that a lot of agencies are proving. We tossed it around your company, we tossed it around our company. It's got to be great. So the customer is never found to be brought to the table. And maybe, and we've worked with some startups like this. You're a founder, you're an executive. You've outgrown what you thought your original understanding was of the executive. So you're a leader who senses there's a gap, but you don't have the language for it. So I guess a story to understand if it's you or not is if you've ever looked at an insight presentation or had one given to you and thought, you know what, this should be more useful than it is. You're probably who we're talking to. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I think one of the things that you just said there kind of just stuck with me, which is data rich and insight starved. That's what I think it is. I think I told you this story once before where somebody went upstairs to see the chairman of the network with this beautiful PowerPoint presentation that was filled with slide after slide of charts and graphs and numbers and, all this other stuff. And he went up there, he handed it to him, and the guy took it and literally didn't even just threw it across the room and just said, "What are the 2 things I need to know?" And that's what, that's for a lot of executives, that's kind of like, they give me the gist of what it is that I need to be able to make a decision to move forward. And I think, like you said, successful executives, savvy executives, smart executives, they have an innate ability to understand when they have the information that they need and when they don't. And a lot of them, and I mean, look, I work with them a lot. You can talk numbers until people, the eyes glaze over and the head starts to pound. And it's like, because you're not actually providing the information that they need. One time a boss said to me, he goes, "Look, John, if somebody asks you for the time, they don't need you to tell them how you made the watch." And it's kind of like, I didn't think I was that bad. I honestly don't. But anyways, that's kind of the point. And I think that's one of the things that, like, getting back to the foundational question that you had about this particular episode, which is, how do we drive good business decisions and how do we prove our value in that process? And, that's part of it. And I think any executive who finds that they're maybe frustrated, and it's not for lack of good people and not for lack of good effort, but it's just for lack of something else that they can't put their finger on. That's, I think, who we can maybe speak to best.
Yeah. Yeah. You had told me also, I thought you were going to go with the other story that you had said, this is really about insights. Insights can be relevant or irrelevant. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the things that are found out are not directly tied to a decision. They're tied to just, okay, it's going to be interesting information. Somebody's got to find this interesting because, by golly, we spent all the time, money, and effort on it, right? And I can remember you telling a story about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you also were in a room. The PowerPoint went up there. A bar had moved from, it was a tracking study or something. Anyway, a bar had moved up a certain percentage. So, that movement was shown in green. And I can't remember who you said raised their hand, but I think it was one of the executives raised their hand, goes, "Okay, so what does that mean?" And after much hemming and hawing, I think he told the story was the person who's representing a very expensive contract basically goes, "I have no idea."
Yeah.
And then the executive keeps going, which obviously an executive would. "So what does it mean for me?" Like that's a move. And you're telling me it should matter. It's telling me, it's got this big bump. And I think I honestly, because I think I used this story way back when you told it to me to begin with, I think you just said, the presenter just went, "I don't know." You remember that? It's up.
It's up.
It went up.
Yeah, that's basically the frustration that executives feel. I can feel it because I can feel it when they're hearing information that's not resonating with them. It's not answering whatever the question is that they have in their minds when they walk into the room is not being addressed. And you can just feel sort of the unease and the tension rise because they're getting more and more frustrated. And for me at this point, it's very easy to see. Um, and that sort of takes us into another area that I don't know if you wanted to get into today or not, but that's sort of, understanding the business question that is in front of the person before you even engage in a project is critical. It's very critical. And it's all too rare. I mean, I've had the privilege of mentoring a lot of people in my career, and I have always advocated, the best thing that you can do before you even open one spreadsheet or look up one thing or anything else is, ideally back when everybody was in office, walk down the hall if the person is in our building and go into their office and sit down, see if they've got 5 minutes, sit down and talk with them and understand why are they asking for this, or what is it that they're asking for? What is it that you're actually trying to meet? What is the need that you're trying to meet? And understanding that makes our work so much more valuable. And that's to me the best and most direct way that your value is proved. It's when you're in a room and somebody hears what they need, what they feel confident enough to make the decision. Whichever way they're going to make the decision is fine, but they at least feel confident enough that they've gotten something that makes them feel about making the decision that they have to make.
Well, I just want to loop this back to the idea that what you just said, there was not one, for the executives that are listening, is not one thing there that says, hey, magical mystery, we're going to tell a story. You're going to just be overwhelmed by the story and just love us because of it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't think we should be boring as our industry to executives. And I go back to when I've tried to rectify this, but when I was first starting out, I wasn't a decision maker. Now I've gone through being a decision maker with a couple of companies, and it is a different world. And you do look at things entirely different than if I'm the portrayer of the facts. I'm the customer insight accountant standing up there, and I must give you an audit of how your customer looks. And yes, you do have to tell a good story. You have to make the data sing, but you just hit on a point. What they're trying to get out of the story has nothing to do with the story itself. It has to do with a decision. They've got to make a decision. They want that story. If you're going to tell a great story, that's wonderful, but make it relevant to what they're going to have to act on. Is that a good summation of what you just said?
I think so. Look, I mean, a great story based on flawed research isn't going to do anybody any good. That's no matter how much you flower it up or make it interesting, or you're throwing anecdotes, or serve the booze or whatever the hell it is, it's not going to make the research better if the person isn't getting the information that they want or that they need in order to be able to make whatever decision they need to make moving forward. It doesn't matter how pretty you tell the story. It's still not satisfying. Storytelling isn't the problem, I don't think. I'm sure there's some people who are better at it than others, but that's not the issue that I think we're trying to address here.
Right. I have another article that I just want to read. This is from a researcher. So this is,
okay, here we go.
If you're a decision maker and you're listening to this, just hold on. We're going to get to what our thoughts are on this, but this is the way the industry is looking at it. Now, right now, this researcher is, attributing all the problems to AI, but they do make some interesting points here, John, that I think we should use to help people understand there are different ways of looking at this. And if you start with the decision first, it changes everything. So this is from a researcher looking at the world going, the more I look at it, the more I think AI may make producing insight easier, but it won't make decision-making easier. A lot of our industry conversation still focuses on the craft, the moderation skill, interview depth and input, reading tone, managing silences. But I think the decision makers don't buy craft. I think they buy reduced uncertainty. And what I'm noticing isn't a drop in research demand. If anything, teams are overwhelmed by insight, accumulated decks, conflicting findings, AI summaries layered on top of older research. The question isn't, can we run another study? It's more often, A, what signals actually hold up under scrutiny? B, what survives when findings contradict each other? And at what point is the evidence strong enough to act? Now, here's my point when I read that. Look, I agree with a lot of what's being said there, but I think this is a researcher looking at it like a practitioner, and not a problem. Nothing wrong with that. That's where they're actually coming from. And a lot of practitioners, when you read our industry thoughts out there, are saying the same thing. It's the only perspective that they have. But I think we've already talked about this, but just interested in you taking it on a little bit more and sharing what you think about it. I think most of the reason the entire industry lives outside or is disconnected from the actual decision makers, that reason is why 90%, and at times it's even gone as high as 95% of the actionable research and insights, as you said, everybody has to call it nowadays, when they come back, nothing changes. Nothing changes. The heart of the problem is the executives understand what they're hearing. They're not confused, but it's not an insight that they can act on. So, is what it is. What do you think?
It, it's interesting that article that you just read, there's a few things in it that are somewhat interesting. Two things. I think number one, it's very important to understand where the client is coming from, internal or external in your case. Where is the client coming from? Truly understanding what it is that they are grappling with. What is it that they need to understand in order to move forward? What is the business conundrum that's in front of them that we need to answer? Because when you understand that, you can approach the problem, you can tackle it properly. You can understanding what is needed to make a good decision. And that's challenging. And one of the reasons I told you about, the people that I mentor, I would always ask them to go down. And for a lot of people, that was a new thing for them. They never, thought of that before. And that disconnect, if you're just sitting behind a desk and looking at data or reading focus groups or reading summaries or something like that and giving it to a business executive who's making these on the fly decisions that, can affect, thousands of people and millions of dollars, each one is behind a wall that they don't necessarily know is there. And so we need to break through that wall. AI is not going to help you do that. I actually had a conversation with a woman who I think was the best executive that I'd ever worked with. And we were talking about this meeting that had come up, and she was regretting that she was unable to attend it. She was listening to it, I guess, on the phone or something like that. It was a conference call or something. And she was saying, things basically moved the way that they had hoped that they would. But she said, and I never even thought of this. She goes, I missed being in the room and watching their body language and seeing what words they responded to and didn't respond to, and what it was that made them flinch and what it was that didn't. And I thought, and it never even occurred to me. I mean, she's a very senior executive, and it was something that seemed so basic, but I was like, wow, that's amazing that she's still so into it, that she reads that, she can read that. And that informs how she would say, behave or negotiate within the room. Well, the same can be from the insight side of things. You were talking about, conflicting results or whatever, conflicting opinions and stuff like that. So much of what a good insights person can do is understand when people are telling you exactly what it is that they mean and when people are actually sort of inferring something. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
We have to interpret. And then once we interpret, that gives us the ability, if we've made a good connection with our business partner, to be able to convey the information so that they're not left there with, well, there's some good and there's some bad. Here you go.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's always going to be good and there's always going to be bad, but you have to figure out, okay, but how does it balance in this case? And, how would I balance it? How would you balance it? What is it that's more important for you to pay attention to on the bad side for this particular question, as opposed to any other question? Because just coming in and saying, AI, like you said, AI can look at, a wealth of studies that have been done and, mean, look, AI is not perfect. AI is flawed. And AI, like I said, like, the story I was just telling you about that executive, AI can't be in the room and understand when somebody's sweating or when somebody's got a tick or when somebody's drumming their fingers or when somebody's shifting in their seat, when somebody's crossing their arms and uncrossing, stuff like that. And all of that stuff can be very important, right? You follow or not? Am
Yeah.
I just
Oh, no, no,
barking up a
no, no,
tree?
no. No, you're not barking up a tree.
But
You're doing that.
there's no AI that's ever going to be able to tell you that. And that's critical to understanding sometimes. You need to understand that in order to make good, confident business decisions. You really do.
You really do. So
At
I'm
the end of
going
the
to
day,
tell you
we're
a
all
story.
people.
You're talking in this vision of a situation that I've been in came to me. I'm just going to tell you it,
Okay.
and then I want you to see if this. I mean, I don't think AI could ever reproduce this. So, conference room full of people,
Do
30,
people know
40
that we're
people.
AI right now? You and
I'm the avatar. No, they don't. I think they just got their fill of, oh, I don't think this is an avatar. That's the way to, that's just not perfect enough.
Sorry,
But you know
I
what? But
waylaid you. Go ahead.
yeah, but people are messy. People are robust. And I think even we want to think of people as decision makers, like the highest, one of the highest people that I've ever presented to you recently runs a company, grabbed a huge niche of his industry, and then said, there's got to be more to it than this. Started working with me, and we started going down this path 6 years ago, 7 years ago. And so there was trust gained. There was, we're acting on this, et cetera, et cetera. But the very last presentation that just to me says, this is, I think, what you're talking about, is standing up there in front of this room full of people. And we're going through information that everybody in the room is completely engaged with. That's not the problem at all. But the president is sitting there, and the president of this company, he asked a question, and it was really kind of simple, and yet it wasn't. He said, okay, so, we've been sitting here, we've listened to this now 6 years, we're in our seventh year, whatever. It's everything that you found. I still want to know, what do I need to do to own more of my customers' entire category experience? Okay, so we had the tracking, we had the data, we had customer insight coming out our ears. And here, I went down this path. I didn't pull up a chart. I had him picture something. So screen is up behind me, PowerPointing away. Everybody in the room needs to take notes is taking notes. But he asked me that question, and I went, okay, this is I think this is a more important question because he doesn't usually say very much. He's the president. Why would he? And so I kind of got away from the screen, went over in a corner, and just started talking to him, having him envision. Okay, so his product owns a certain space in anybody's home, a renter, higher income, lower income. There's a space within their home that they own, but there are competitors that own that space. So what I did was I walked over in the corner of the room and I said, okay, I want you to imagine your higher income, older couple, kids are gone. They're walking into this space of their living area, and you own that product and you own that product, but you're not going to own that product and you don't own that product. And so that's going to be the way that area lives for that type of individual. And he goes, okay. Now, the question is, how much of that do you want to own? But before you answer that, let's take another example. Let's go to this 30-ish age range, middle income. They may rent, they may own, they're just getting started with their kids. They've got a lot of issues going on. And here's their area of that house. And you own this product and you own that product, but you don't own these other two products or three products over here. So the question is, what do you want to own there? And I said, just before you give that answer, let me take you to the renter. And, here's this 20 something just getting started. They're renting. They go into their much smaller area And, you know, yeah, you may have a bigger percentage of it there because it's just a much smaller area, but what do you really want to own? How much of each of those areas do you want to own? And it was funny because, well, it's not really funny, it's human. This is like, he didn't hesitate at all. He goes, well, I'm a selfish bastard. I want it all. And everybody in the room dies of laughter because they were watching this going, what the heck? This will be very interesting. But here's the thing. It wasn't funny just because of his response as much as it was really powerful because suddenly he saw the implication of everything that was over there on the slide, not as data,
Right.
but now he could own it. And he saw it as missed surface opportunity. It was a strategic possibility he had never thought of before as going, if that's what I want, and you're telling me I'm not going to get it, I got to do something different. And surprisingly, that shift in his mind led to one of their boldest strategic moves that the entire industry had ever seen. And now, today, they own the entire category. And it was all because he couldn't really figure out what he really, really wanted. And then because of being able to see it and understand that he wasn't going to get it without some changes, he was able to actually make decisions that, I mean, set
But he
an
didn't
industry
he didn't
completely
see it in
different.
he didn't see it in a bar graph. He didn't see it in a chart. He didn't see it in a
Nope.
table. He didn't see it in a spreadsheet. It was your ability to take that information and humanize it in a way that he could understand, that he could visualize. And that's what made it
Yep.
happen for him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was like, and I'm not even sure how that happens other than there is a process that you do have to start with making sure that the data was right. The right people were asked the right questions. I mean, there is a process to make sure that that's completely, as one of my clients said, look, I don't want to question. I don't want to have to be able to question anything that you put up there. It has to be bulletproof. And this was a person working inside of some of the largest companies in the world as a consultant. He's like, whatever you put up there, it's got to be bulletproof. It's got to be statistically meaningful. And somehow you have to make it so that they can act on it. Now, I don't care what you do. I don't care how you get to it. I don't care what process you use. Just make sure it's that way. And I kind of took that to heart because I was very early in my experiences out there with decision makers. And I think that's the only reason that when I'm sitting there and standing there with a decision maker who's like, just tell me what this really means.
Yep.
And then go on,
That's it.
okay, I get it. So anyway,
All right.
any other thoughts on that one?
No.
So
Back.
we've talked about this disconnect between the decisions and the insights that are coming back. And I there's another proof point that AT&T used to have a think tank. And this was back before net promoter scores, customer satisfaction indexes, CX, customer experience, all that kind of stuff. In fact, a lot of the things, like even Six Sigma, came out of this think tank group. So, I mean, if a lot of the processes we use, a lot of the analytics that we use, there's usually an AT&T think tank alumni behind it. And so I shared with a colleague of mine who's 10 years my senior, AT&T think tank graduate alumni, that this is what we were going to be talking about. And he almost freaking fell off his chair because his response to the premise of, yeah, well, you know, we do a bunch of stuff and nobody's done anything with it, is that's exactly right. At AT&T, I'd say 99% of what we produced never changed anything. The company was going to do what it was going to do. We didn't change a strategy. We didn't change a tactic, a product, and definitely not the company direction. He said, so you would ask, what is it that we did? And he said, 99% of the time, we were just confirming to our executives, AT&T is wonderful. And we knew it. You know, it was fluff. It was just, there was nothing there designed to impact anything. Everyone knew world-class talent, world-class analytics, world-class this, that, and the other thing, massive budgets. Not a thing, which I guess where I was going with that was kind of to sum up what we're talking about is this isn't new. This is a really uncomfortable discussion. I think that's why there's so many things like what I read this morning and are coming across our desk. We've been fighting this thing for 40 to 50 years. We've had now better tools, better data, better intentions, and we have a decision design issue that we haven't been able to figure out how to crack it. So that was what his thoughts were. And you weren't at AT&T, but you were inside major organizations. What do you think? Is that still something that you found is prevailing today?
Absolutely. 1,000%. Because sometimes people don't want to hear uncomfortable truths. And sometimes people don't want to upset the apple cart. And sometimes there are things that good research can point to in terms of like truly changing a business, that it requires a certain type of executive mentality, personality, courage to be able to make that decision, to be able to see what the change could be based on the, to trust in it enough to make that decision and go with it. But far, far, far more often, people like to use research just to validate what they believe. And that's a real trap, because, what is it? The figures don't lie, but liars can figure. People want to hear,
Mm-hmm.
people want to believe what they want to believe, and they will use research to just justify the status quo more often than anything. I mean, even now I've heard, like recently, I've heard of some shows that are possibly coming back that are being, everything's in a reboot right now, right?
Right.
Everything's in a reboot. And it kind of speaks to a dearth of ideas. Well, maybe it's not really a dearth of ideas, but the thing is that when I look at some of these ideas, I think to myself, okay, well, when was it that show was popular? And you go, well, it was popular like 40 years ago, 35 years
Mm-hmm.
ago, 30 years ago. And I think to myself, okay, well, who is the audience that they're possibly targeting 30 or 40 years down the road? Because the younger audiences of today don't know what that show was or why it was popular or who the people that were in
Uh,
it are. And why should they care now? So are you just rebooting it so that people that watched it when they were in their 20s will now watch it when they're in their 60s? And I can guarantee you that when those shows premiere and don't do what they're expected to do, they will turn around and go, yeah, but the research said it was going to be, because it was a hit.
yeah.
It used to be a hit. And
Yeah.
and so they're doing that because that's when they use research as like a safety blanket or whatever. They want to be able to point to it and say, but the research said this, and they will look at that research and just say, look, the show was a big hit, and miss the bigger picture, which is, yes, it was a big hit, before Y2K. They'll say the research said that it should have worked. Whereas, you know, relevant research, as you put it, useful research, good research would say, yes, but, you would say, yeah, it was popular then. But if we just do like, however, whatever kind of modality you want to use and say, how many people are aware of it? How many people know what it is or why it was? And how many people are interested in it? The people that actually advertisers are interested in reaching today, that would tell you, you know what, maybe we should take a chance on something that nobody's ever seen before. Maybe we should take a chance on a talent that people don't know who their name is right now instead. But that's an example of people going like, you know what, I want to make this show and I'm going to do it. And I can find the research that's going to tell me that that's, okay. And we're doing it and I don't care. And that's kind of,
And
I guess that's not exactly the same as what you were talking about with AT&T, but there's other instances that I can point to where people are like, we like things the way they are, and we're gonna interpret this research to mean that, and we're not going to change a thing. The research says everything is hunky dory. That's what I get out of it. What are you
yeah,
going to do?
yeah. And that's, I guess you'd call that a structural decision design failure. But I guess where I was going with that is you're seeing it today, same situation, similar situation to what the guy at AT&T saw literally decades ago. So I
Yeah.
guess it kind of tells us that the next new tool isn't going to fix this because it's a human problem.
Oh, for sure. Like I said, we said this earlier. It's like, you know what?
Yeah.
We're all humans. I mean, and the research is about humans, and we're humans making decisions about human behavior for the most part, right? I mean,
Yeah.
all business has to do with relation between humans and stuff like that. So that's why AI is not going to fix it. More data is not going to fix it. You're right. The structural decision problem has been around for decades. And now we have, more software and more data and more input, and more stimulus and everything else, more modalities, but it hasn't really changed. It's the same as it's been. That's the bridge that has yet to be built.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how about we introduce ourselves to the people listening and made it this far? They'll just take a little pause. All three people watching us, of which you and I count as one each. So here's the deal for myself, John Burshak Research. John Willie's going to do his intro here, but we're living on two different sides of the same table. My whole career is outside of companies and worked with all types and sizes, from the biggest in the world, the Amazons, Apples, Chase Bank, all the way to venture startups. Every one of them having a varying level of belief in this concept that customer understanding should drive better decisions. And it's interesting as you watch this, from my perspective, it's not like I want to produce any more research. That would be really easy to do in today's world. Everybody is doing or wants to do some type of research, get some customer insight or just insight, data analytics, AI. I guess for me, what's driving me for this is very simple. It is ages and ages and ages ago, somebody used a word with me about research, and it was kind of the equivalent impact of you getting that report thrown back across the desk or at the person. Just don't produce credenza food, and credenza food, given younger people listening to this, it's where there are volumes and volumes and volumes of all of this stuff that you've produced just sitting on a shelf. Hasn't impacted anything. I made a very concerted promise to myself that that was not going to be me. And it actually does take making that kind of a promise to actually do things differently in an industry that likes to just go, oh, you know what, we can do AI now, and they'll get the people and they'll write the report and nobody's still going to do anything with it. And that's just not the way that I've operated at all, because of those words said to me at the very start. So we just like to design insight that earns its way into decisions. We've done it for organizations, every size, every industry, every maturity level. My goal and my passion is basically to keep doing that. So Johnny, your turn.
Well, I've spent most of my career on the other side of the fence. I've been on the client side, and I've worked at large corporations, mid-sized corporations. I mean, well, the entirety of my career has been spent in and around media and essentially content creation and distribution. And I've worked for large companies, small companies, networks, studios, cable, television, ad agencies. Pretty much every aspect of media that you can think of is something that I've been on. And all of it has been in what was termed when I started research, TV research.
Yep.
And I was a research analyst. And honestly, that's how I still refer to myself, even though there's a lot of other buzzier names to put to the word research these days, including, insights and things like that, which is valuable. But, and, you and I share a lot of the same values about the work that we do. And, I learned that because you and I work together on some pretty important projects that actually speak to the very topics that we're addressing in this, in terms of being able to do some really good work that could drive some very important decisions, and running into, the decision architecture problem that you spoke to just a minute ago. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Well, let's dive into that decision architecture problem. And let's take it from a couple of stories. The one you just referenced where we worked together, I think is worth telling here. And that would be, here's a great, this is the way that I remember it being phrased to begin with. Here's a great idea. Here's a great technology. We don't know, the technological team loves it. We don't know what to do with it nor how to position it. And right now, as I remember that first meeting, we're sitting around the table. There was not an executive in sight, right? I mean, maybe I'm wrong and but there, it was really the tech team, product team, your insights research team. I mean, but it was one of those that exists in so many different companies where we've created this or we think we've got this. We think it's really cool. And but the the uppers are just going, okay, we're hearing about it, but what does it really mean? Walk me through that story because I love that story. We did so much work on that, like you said, to raise it to that
Why did
executive level.
what we had developed was a way for at-home audience, television audience people to be able to interact with our television content using their remote control, which was amazing, because it was basically a lot of, the stuff it was essentially, quizzes and things like that. And so it was an opportunity for the audience at home to play along. We developed that. And then somebody came up with the idea of, what if we offered advertisers the opportunity to have people actually respond to in-show advertisements in the same way? We could present like a question or, get more information, or do you remember this about the commercial or that about the commercial, which would have been a pioneering way for advertisers to basically understand whether or not people were paying attention to their ads and how engaged they were and whether or not they were really interested in the product. What we didn't know was whether or not people would participate in that. And you're right. At the time, the upper management had very little idea about this at all. I mean, to them, it was just sort of like I don't know, it was just sort of a plaything. It was a lark. They weren't paying much attention to it, whatever. And we had decided like we needed to figure out, would people do it, and were people interested, and how much would they engage with it? And that's when you and I did a lot of work to understand, not only would people use it, how did they use it? What did they like about it? Why did they like it? And how much would they be willing to engage with it? And I mean, the results were surprising to everybody. I mean, it was remarkable. I mean, I don't think we even understood how much audience people were into it. It was far, far more than we had anticipated. We thought we'd be lucky. People were willing to do it. And we could, I mean, it was a pathway toward, I think, revolutionizing, the connection between an advertiser and an audience member in terms of, being able to have, real-time live interaction. And we were able to record responses. And now, I mean, the audience side of it was anonymized, of course. We weren't picking up any kind of, personally identifiable information, but we could at least say back to the, advertiser, we had an audience of this size. This percentage of them saw your ad and responded to it. And this percentage of them actually responded to the question that you asked, correctly. So it was a way to at least quantify and to be able to create a bit more of a real, I mean, it was the opportunities that we discovered in this research to expand not only the network's association with its audience, but the network's association with its advertisers, and the advertisers' association with the audience, its potential customers and customer base. It was mind blowing, is what it was, and that's. Then I mean, I know where you're going with this, because we did a lot of work. And it turned out that there was a much, much bigger business opportunity in this than we had even imagined. I mean, our hope was just that people would be willing to try it and to do it, just to engage a little bit. And we found out that people would be willing to pay for the opportunity to do it. We could create a subscription model for people. And there were a lot of other ancillary opportunities too, I think, to be able to create a rewards program and tie it into like one of the home shopping networks. And so that was the result of the research. And as you know, we put it together. And I think that presentation actually was one of the most creative ones that I believe that I've ever been affiliated with, in terms of it being, it was multimedia, and it was comprehensive beyond belief. We had even done, I believe you introduced some price elasticity into this idea of the subscription model, which again
Right.
told us some incredible information about how much people really wanted to participate in this. And it was a potential game changer, I think. And we know where this goes. I can say that part of what we, part of what our technical team had achieved with this was that actually one of the home shopping networks adopted the technology and came and asked me if I could, share some insights with them as to, what it might do and how they should market it. And I just said, you just need to sit back and start counting your cash, because you're going to be this is incredible, because they were very nervous about it. I said, you can retire, you can buy your island and retire. Um, but this was a case though where we had all of this information, and it was solid. It was as solid as could be, and it didn't really met the storytelling. It wasn't so much the storytelling. I mean, because we didn't need to tell a story. The data told the story, and in that case, we actually let the people that we had spoken to and that we had engaged to actually, work the product and use it. We let them tell the story. But the decision wasn't mine, and the decision wasn't yours, and the decision wasn't anybody in the technical teams or the marketing teams or the insight teams. The decision was upstairs. And that's where it takes a certain type of vision and courage to make an investment like that, was potentially game changing. And I have look, I'm not holding it against anybody. I think we did yeoman's work in terms of collecting that information and presenting it in a way that made it, I don't think we lessened the impact. And as I recall, we came out of the initial meeting, and I seemed a little bit disappointed about it. And I remember calling you and talking to you about it and saying, do you think I should go upstairs and talk to the president again? And I did. I went back upstairs and got 5 minutes alone with him. And I looked across and I just said, I just want to be absolutely sure that you understand everything. If you have any questions or anything about any of this, but I just want to make sure that you know what it is that we're trying to convey here, because this is really important. And so your decision matters on this. And, and the decision was a decision. I feel good now about what I did in terms of my role in that. And I feel good about the work that we did together. And, that was definitely an excellent case of listening to the customer, because we went out to the customers and we did hands-on work with them. And we watched them interact with this, I don't know what you want to call it. It wasn't a device. It was a remote control. And
Yeah, as a tool.
to discover that it wasn't just like a play thing for them. And it wasn't just like oh, wouldn't that be nice? They were fully engaged. Even people who weren't that into the content before suddenly became more, because now they could participate in it. And the commercials became more interesting because it wasn't just filler between content anymore, right? It was like, oh yeah, okay, I want to pick, there was value everywhere along the way. But again, the decision architecture reached a point where, it's not my decision. My job was to do the best I could. And I felt like I did in that case. But that's one of those things where you have to just accept I've done my work, but the decision lies elsewhere. I have informed and supported as much as I possibly can. But in this case, if I did have that decision to make, I'd have chosen differently. But, was the research actionable?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. It
Well,
was.
it's interesting because as I'm listening, we started off with the table of, oh, this is a cool idea. And the techies were the ones that were going, oh my gosh, this is the best idea we've ever seen. And what I was thinking as you were talking was the steps we had to take, because you're right. Executives, when we first started, this was not top driven. This was tech driven up, right? And the executives weren't paying attention. Oh, it's a nice, let's pet this over here and hopefully it'll go away and we don't hear much about it. And then all of a sudden, some of the findings started to make it to them where they saw dollars and they saw cents. And that always gets an executive decision maker to go, okay, now I'll listen. And I can remember that we took that over months, and I think it was several months, several different types of studies just to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And then you and I were put in front of the decision makers, the top of the top, and very clearly laid out what could happen to the company. It wasn't just that we were going, oh, they love it. It's just awesome. It was, oh, they love it to this degree. Like, let's put some dollars and cents to this.
Yeah.
This is a moneymaker. This is something you can't, like you said, the home shopping network that got a hold of it. I mean, it was a proven point. And even though they made a decision not to move on it, the fact that that was able to be raised up to a decision meant at the where you're talking for 5 minutes to your president just means, considering that never would have seen the light of day without understanding what the executives actually want. And they do want a better revenue. They do want better retention. They do want all of those things that business people do. And we brought it in being able to say, especially in the final meeting that I remember, actually just cutting it right down to, this is money for you. Yeah. Yet, even as I think about it, there's still, when you think about, well, was there, because this is where the industry goes kind of, but it should have been an ROI on that research. And it's like, no, it was an ROI on the decision. Like the decision could definitively be made one way or another. One person's going to do it, not us, but they had everything they could possibly need. And so there was no way to calculate an ROI off of that. That's the wrong question.
It's a good point. I never thought of it that way, but you're right. That's whatever investment was made in the work that we did in terms of all of the surveys and all of the groups and all of the IDIs and everything else that we did, at the end of the day, right, to the bean counter, right, it looks like this big blob of expenditure that led nowhere. But could it have? Yeah. Should it have? Maybe. The president did thank me for coming up and talking to him directly. So, I mean, I appreciated that. But that's one of those ones where, I know, like you say, it's a decision architecture thing. It's sort of like, that just kind of gets to the heart of everything we're talking about. It's like, we can only carry it. So you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make him drink is one thing. But also the proving of the ROI of the value is what we did. Was it valuable? It certainly became valuable for another network.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, seriously, it did.
It did. Amazingly valuable. I think actually they just recently ended that about a year or so ago or 2 years ago, maybe less than that. But anyways.
Well, I think the technology at this point has changed so much that.
Correct. But the point is that for a couple of decades anyway, it worked damn well for them and made them a lot of money. And it could have, I mean, honestly, for myself and my career, that's one of the missed opportunities that I can't say I regret it, because again, it wasn't my decision, but I really wish it had gone the other way, because it could have revolutionized a lot of the aspects of our business, which again would be disrupted as of what's occurred over the last 5 years or whatever. But during that time, could have been amazing.
Yeah, it was definitely a disruptor, no question about it. Well, I guess where I wanted to go with that was the idea that was a decision architecture issue at the very end, not because we didn't use everything possible to get it pulled together and make as much sense and answer all of the. I mean, you're right. The CFOs and all of those folks, the money folks, were in the room as well. It wasn't just the executive decision makers. It was the money folks we were talking to as well. So, I mean, that was truly raising something to the level where I don't even think it. But I guess here's where I'm going. Even if it had been successful, I don't think someone could have done an ROI on what we had done. even if it was successful, even if we were with the other, you know, I,
Well,
here's where I'm going with this.
go.
We got the insights that, kind of like helping the president earlier, visualize something different than just a bunch of data. We helped CFOs, the CEO, and
Mhm.
all the other C's go, wow, okay, I get it. I get it. And they could honestly say they got it, and they just chose a different direction. But even if they had said yes, we're moving forward with it, it goes back to, I think that's all that we were needing to do. I mean, we should feel very proud about that because we actually listened to what they wanted, got them the answers to those questions. That's your idea of finding out what the heck they want. Like, let's try that approach first. And we did that and then kept moving it up. I'm reminded of a time when I actually was a decision maker on a board of a nonprofit. One of the things that we faced was we did have a president who was going behind the board's back. So we had to make some decisions about property, about setup, how we were going to be moving forward as an organization. And we had a president who was going behind our back, even went to the degree of setting up a competing nonprofit in the industry that we were in, and then trying to grab our donors. And I can remember being a decision maker there, the decision maker on the board at that time, going, okay, we've got 6 other heads around this table, and we have no idea what's really we can do. Like we were at loggerheads going, we know this is going on. We know that our base has been infiltrated, if you will, and yet we don't know what we can do. And I'll tell you this, research, being the researcher in the room, I said, we've got to get answers to these questions. And I designed the study. This is very rare, but I designed the study, went through, donated the time, everything. And when we came back, the decision was clear moving forward because we knew a percentage definitely on the one side, another percentage that would support us, but had no clear understanding where us were going. I could never figure an ROI out for something that basically ended up saving that nonprofit. Eventually, we were able to move away from the CEO, or the president. We brought in someone. It was amazing the steps we had to go through to save that organization, which now it owns property. It has been growing for the past number of years, financially very well off. That would have not been the case if we had not made the decisions from the data that we had found out about the people that we were trying to work with as donors for our organization. And yet I look back at that as a decision maker, knowing that all those insights, like your executive is looking at it going, all those insights are really helpful. Like, I get it now. I understand. My CFO is going, not bad. But the idea of being able to put a number to it, it was just like, I mean, I'm seeing, again, all kinds of things coming across my desk about, well, we've got to be able to make it that there's a number there that's really for what we do. And in a way, you can, but in another way, it's like, that's not really the point, is it? But what do you think?
Well, I mean, to me, this story is an incredibly unique time where the person who actually did the work was the decision maker, or at least part of the decision making. Because
Yeah, that's not happening very often.
that doesn't, no, it's not going to happen very often. And so you were actually able to take advantage of your own expertise in terms of interpreting the data and being able to help drive a decision, right? That was information based, that was, that was based on some worthwhile insights. The ROI part of it, in a way, is something that you probably know yourself internally. You know, in your heart or in your mind what it did, what
Hmm.
the value
Oh,
of it was.
absolutely. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
from an accounting perspective, could you, take a spreadsheet and put a number to it? No. But because of
No.
your unique position in that particular instance, I think you're able to, cross that bridge between the work that was done, the decision that was made, and what it led to. You're able to see how, even though it's somewhat separated, right, you're able to cross that gap and understand. And that's the rarity, but that's only because you wore two hats in that particular instance. The
Yeah, I
key is
did.
to try. Yeah, you did. And I think that's an example of a time where like it gives you, I think, a greater empathy, sympathy, understanding of sort of where the decision maker's heads are, what the decision maker is looking for, what the decision maker needs, and what the pressures are that are on them when they're being presented with research or data or insights that may or may not seem relevant or appear relevant or whatever. Because
Mhm.
to create the ROI. Basically, look, what are we doing? We're trying to reduce risk and increase confidence,
Yep. Yep.
right? And so I think, like you say, in terms of ROI, it's almost incalculable unless you have the ability to understand both the supplier and the decision maker and understand, how you've helped support a decision that's led to some really good things, but you can't necessarily tie it directly back to it. Like you said, the nonprofit's still around. They own property.
Yeah. It's interesting to look at it because I think you and I, especially with the one example that you shared, I mean, from an inside perspective, that was very, you really wish it would have gone a different way. Wasn't your choice, but I do know from coming from the outside, man, best foot put forward. They had everything they could possibly need. They understood fully. Even the CFO and all of the financial group that was sitting there understood fully what the impact of the decision that was facing them. And so it just took, calling that shot, which I guess you could look at it and say another agency did, or another network in your case did. And that really is, just shows it was good work. Someone else took advantage of it, but it was good work.
If I had been in your situation, in that situation, if I had been able to like
Hmm.
not only do the research but make the decision, I'd be on an
Yeah.
island right now.
I
Good.
think we are. I think we can land the plane. Between us, we've lived both sides, the inside companies where decisions get made and outside companies trying to influence those decisions. This season, we're going to dismantle why insights fail at the moment it's supposed to matter most. And by the end of these episodes, you won't just think differently about insight. You will recognize when a question is worth answering and when it's just producing noise. You'll hear executives differently. You'll be a different executive, and you'll know why certain work will survive the executive's pressure. So, friends, here's hoping that when you're working with us, that work will never have to worry about surviving the pressure that you may put us under. So, if insight, let me just close this up by if insight isn't designed to answer a business question someone owns, it's not insight, it's just information. And if there's one thing that most organizations don't realize, the difference between insight that gets ignored and insight that drives billion-dollar decisions isn't volume. I think John made that point earlier. It's architecture. It's how the questions were framed, who they were asked of, how the answers were translated into the decision makers' scenarios. So we work with leadership teams, design this type of decision grade intelligence systems. They turn insight into measurable business impact, and that's what we're going to unpack in this series. Next time, we're going to define what decision grade intelligence actually looks like and why most organizations never get there. Because once you see how decision makers actually trust insight, you'll never design getting insights the same way again. And as a decision maker, you'll be in charge of it, knowing what you're going to know from this podcast here. And that's exactly why we built what we now call the Actionable Insight to Actions Methods, or AIM for short, a way to ensure the work of bringing your customer into the decision-making process doesn't just generate insight, it generates the executive confidence required to act on it. Decision makers, if you're at an agency or a company, large or small, and you need someone to work with you to ask the right questions, get you the right answers that you need in order to make a decision you know will have a business impact and make a difference, drop me an email at john@bershekresearch.com and let's talk. Thank you very much.